Hello, my name is Kai, and this is my analysis and commentary on Pickpocket's final climactic prison scene. The first thing to note is the opening of the movie. The director, Robert Bresson, begins the movie by explicitly telling the audience the style of this film is not that of a thriller. What I believe Bresson is saying here is the stakes of the movie are not what the audience would typically expect. There are no life or death situations, nor any violent or sexual scenes. Instead, the movie's conflict is entirely internal. The conflict we witness is Michel's struggle to find out who he is, and whether or not he can fit into society, given his unstoppable urge to pick pockets, his selfless commitment, his undying devotion. Now, throughout Pickpocket, Michel has developed his own personal moral code that supersedes the morality of the society around him. He has even gone so far as to tell the police chief, to his face no less, that he believes himself to be superhuman, and a greater benefit to society than the ordinary people around him. He reasons that because he is capable of so much more than the people working within society's ethics, his crimes are justified. This is Michel's teleological suspension of the ethical. He sees the ends as justifying the means, and several times during the film we see that he actually looks down on people that simply accept the code of ethics put forth by society, symbolized by him getting up and walking away mid-conversation, usually without even saying a word of farewell. From his actions we can infer that he is a knight of resignation, very Kierkegaardian. He has no choice but to walk a path separate from society, because he is instinctively drawn to making his own conclusions about morality, pushing him away from the people around him. For Michel, pickpocketing was never about the money, but the thrill of being a predator openly walking amongst its prey, the feeling that he is somehow greater than Jean, Jacques, and even the police chief. He thinks he is something new, unique, and entirely solitary because of it. Also crucial here is the chief's reaction. Upon hearing what is essentially Michel's confession and his admittance that he does not have any remorse for his crimes at all, the chief simply drinks his alcohol and walks away without a word, just as Michel does when confronted with people who adhere to society's codes. You can think of the chief as a stand-in for all of society. He cannot afford to entertain other moral codes. He has to resign himself to working within the rules of society, just as Michel has to resign himself to working within the rules of his personal moral code. Also take note of how this scene is shot. Until the camera pans over and we see Michel sitting next to Jacques, he may as well not have even been there. He's not talking, none of the characters are reacting to him. It seems like he's completely oblivious or unaware that this conversation is happening. He's not invested until the chief turns to him. Another key detail in how this scene is shot is Jacques. When the camera pans over to Michel and the chief and talks about their conversation, Jacques is just completely excluded. The frame ends right where he's sitting, and the other two characters don't even acknowledge him anymore. It seems like they're content to talk to each other, knowing that they both have moral codes outside of society's, while Jacques is content to live within society's ethical code. The final prison scene, then, represents the ultimate test of Michel's moral code. It is the most direct confrontation possible between his and society's ideas of right and wrong. Throughout the film, we have seen several times where Michel has had a close encounter with the law, but rather than change his ways or become more cautious, Michel seems to enjoy these events. He wants to be caught, because he instinctively knows this is the only way he can prove to himself that his moral code is superior, that he is the superhuman he claims to be. This is what compels him to seemingly paradoxically confess to everything, then later tell Jean that he plans to deny it all, simply to make things harder for the police, to challenge their moral code. For Michel, there can be no metaphorical crucifixion, because he already reconciled with himself. He's simply in too deep to admit to himself the flaws in his lifestyle, and cannot see anything that could change his point of view. At this point, he's come to terms with his personal flaws, and is resigned to the consequences of his actions. It is not fate or destiny guiding him, but his own choices. Even behind bars, Michel's strict adherence to his personal morality makes him powerful. When Jean comes to visit him, he instructs her simply to stay, and she obeys without question, almost like a dog. This mirrors the shots of Michel as he has been asked to stay multiple times and chooses to leave. While Michel is able to simply walk away from his commitments to society, this is not a choice Jean can make at this point, because her personal crucifixion, not loving Jacques enough, in her mind, has left her aimless and dejected. She is resigned to living separate from society now, just as Michel is, and in this way, Michel has become her new idea of society. The camera then cuts to Michel, stoic as ever, nonchalantly being led out of his cell and out of frame, as if the bars are not even there. He is facing life in prison, but he's still in control of the situation. His moral code supersedes society, even now. Shockingly, we see that even the prospect of being put behind bars for life has not changed Michel's outlook at all. He remarks, "Why go on living? I hadn't made up my mind." The context of this line seems to suggest that prison has caused him to consider suicide, but in reality, this is something Michel has been thinking about long before his arrest. If he cannot be accepted and must live his life entirely alone, is there truly a point to living? Why should he go on if the only judge of his actions that he truly cares about is himself? Michel is distraught at this point. He wanted to be caught, to test his own moral code, but he sees now that it's in many ways a meaningless test because he's the only one who cares about the results. The crucial change that comes about as a result of this scene is Michel's newfound attachment, not to society, but to Jean as an individual. We see in the span of just a few seconds as Michel considers for the first time that Jean could be the superhuman he has claimed to be, a terrifying prospect. Michel has, at this point, become a master thief. He is no stranger to brazenly stealing from people right in front of him. Yet Jean leaving and reading her subsequent letter makes his heart pound. He realizes that she has not only discarded society's morality, but adopted his code as her own. She has gone from decrying thievery as the worst possible crime to standing by Michel, even as he is punished for his crimes. Michel, in this moment, realizes he has nothing to regret, that his choices, however despicable or unwise, have led him to this situation, where he can at last see that Jean, too, judges his actions to be moral. He has found someone whose opinion he actually values, at last justifying his actions externally. With this, he sees he does not have to live within society, but he doesn't have to be alone either. He and Jean are now two of a kind, two knights of resignation that, against all odds, have found each other. It is this realization that cements Michael's certainty in his actions. Although he could not see it at the time, and he could never have, his actions have brought him here, something he could never have done on his own if he tried consciously. In this way, finding love with Jean, the ends, did indeed justify his means, a life of crime. Michel may not be the Nietzschean idea of the Übermensch, he is still in prison, and likely for life, but he and Jean have found each other, and for them, that is enough.